Well, hello, welcome everybody. I'm so pleased to say hello to Nicole Smit. Hello, Nicole.
Hello, hi Sandy. Thanks for having me.
No, well, it's my pleasure to speak with you. I've titled our talk today "The Sound I See" because you are not my usual sort of person to interview, in that you maybe are a visual artist as well in some way, but primarily you are a musician. So could you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Well, I am a singer, songwriter, I suppose. I've been lucky enough to actually be able to call myself that and have been paid to sing for people, and people seem to like it, so that's nice. And I write original material as well, and I've been writing. Yeah, since I was little. I actually recently, sorry to go off on a tangent really, really early on, but I had like tapes from, when I was 9 or something. So that's the earliest evidence of songwriting that I have is from like 94 when I was 9. So I can say that I, definitely started writing songs or making up songs then. But I never thought that anyone was going to hear it. I was just doing it for me, really, with no purpose. So, with all kinds of coincidences, I suppose, like serendipitous meetings with people, and they heard what I did and liked it, and, met a bunch of great musicians here in Edinburgh that pushed me to start singing professionally. And that's how it all started, like about 6, 7 years ago.
Well, I have to say, for people watching, the reason why Nicole and I are even speaking today is because I heard her on the radio a couple of weeks ago. It was on the Craig Charles Funk and Soul show on Radio 6 on Six Music. And I heard this voice and this Sly and the Family Stone hook, and I thought, wow, that is just glorious. The sound was so beautiful. And I played it back several times. We've got obviously a digital radio, and I was like a kid, like with my cassette, like when you're little, rewind, play, and
Oh,
everyone at the dinner table was like, "What are you doing?" I just can't stop listening to this music. It was really, really lovely. And then, because I'm tenacious, I managed to get in touch with you to try and find out when this amazing song is going to be released. So it's called Strong Woman. Can you tell us a
yeah.
little bit about your forthcoming release?
Well, it's going to be out 2nd of April is a preliminary date. Hoping then. We shot a music video for it already, or I did, and that will hopefully come out on the 8th of March for International Women's Day. So it's all appropriate. Hopefully, it'll be yeah, good and inspiring. And I'm so glad that yeah, and you like the song and it's gotten good feedback. It's very, it's quite. I'm quite nervous about the song because it's so raw in comparison to how I usually write. It's very yeah, it's very straightforward. It is just saying it, and I think it's the first time that I've been really, really vulnerable with lyrics, especially. So that was, yeah, it's nice that it's going to be out there, and it's nice that people I suppose, can feel that too. Maybe I don't know if a little bit of that rawness or
Definitely got
vulnerability
something
comes
from it
across.
because I mean we listen to, like, probably most families listen to music all the time in the house, a wide variety of different musical tastes here at home. And yeah, it was like something reached out the radio and gave me a bit of it wasn't a shake, it was like a touch.
Yeah.
Really, it was kind of special. So I'm really delighted, obviously, that you've agreed to speak to me. Also, just to mention there, you would have heard Nicole mentioning that she's in Edinburgh, but it doesn't sound like an Edinburgh accent to me.
Oh yeah. Oh gosh, that's a whole other story. I've been in Edinburgh for 8 years. What are we? From 2012. Yeah, so it'll be 9 years coming up. From yeah, I moved for an old boyfriend, who yeah, I went to St. Andrews. One of my friends went to St. Andrews, and I was traveling, and so we met. And we're still very good friends. He's a blues harmonica player, and it was through him that I met a bunch of other blues musicians in the city. But I moved here from Sweden, but I was born in Indonesia. My grandmother's Swedish, and my other grandfather is Dutch. But so my both of my parents are half Indonesian and half something else. So yeah, I grew up there, and then moved as a teenager to Sweden, and then moved as an adult here. So
Do you think moving and kind of migrating around, how does it inform what you make as a musician?
I think it just makes makes you more open. I feel like it's given me at least the gift of that, of always approaching things in a very wide way, because you just never know. You get used to having to adapt really quickly as well, and because then I also speak all the languages, so my brain is constantly full. I feel like it's full of the language switching and code switching all the time, which is nice. And I think it's very helpful in terms of writing as well, and taking in information. I'm like I like being like linguistic nerd sometimes as
Hmm.
well. And people like, not everyone is really interested whenever I see like, oh, this is this, so the etymology of that must be that, because in Indonesian it means this thing, or in Swedish it means this thing, and like that's interesting. You kind of find like connections between things that yeah, maybe you might not really think about. And I think I actively maybe look for those things as
Hmm.
well.
Do you think that there's an element of kind of like a folk music in what you do? So, I mean, we hear
Yeah,
the jazz and the blues and those direct references, but in terms of actually what you're even saying now, this is something that is very folksy, actually, coming out. This idea of language
yeah, I
and
think so.
tradition.
I think it makes sense why I guess I gravitated towards blues as well, because it is just mostly a lot of that is folksy, isn't it? Stories about
Stories,
people.
yeah.
Yeah, even if you're not writing or singing explicitly about how you grew up or everything, it does inform. It goes through that process of all the things that you've gone through, you lived, and it would represent something. And yeah, it is very folksy. It's very personal,
Personal.
definitely.
Well, I
Yeah.
mean, interestingly for us today, you've selected um, some some other symbols, really, for us to talk through. So, as I said,
Yeah.
the sound I see is the title of our interview today, and that's because I asked you to pick some things so we could talk about how visual art, and in your case also cinema, very much has informed your lyrical musical sensibility. So the first image we're going to look at is this one that you sent to me, and it's by Meredith Frampton. It's of Marguerite Kelsey, the famous model. It's from 1928. Why did you send me this? And this is the very first image you sent me.
Well, I feel like I'm not I took like maybe one course in art history in university, so I'm not well versed in any of this. So I feel like the things that I like is very much aesthetic. Well, at least yeah, it's the aesthetics that definitely grabs me first. And I noticed, I think after a while, especially when I put together the things when you asked me as well, because it's hard because you like a lot of things. But this one was just one of, I must have seen it at the Tate. I think it's at the Tate Gallery. Yeah. Um, I like. I think I'm attracted to women. I mean, that's maybe not surprising. You're attracted to, I think, things that you can sort of relate to, and there's something about paintings of women who like how she's looking. It's very. I want to know. I want to know what she's feeling, and it's because there's some sadness to it, which is very appealing to me. That complexity of what someone might be feeling, and in combination with the very very clean lines
Yeah.
of the painting, it's just so. I don't know if is it like hyper real or something, maybe? Would you call that style? Is that hyper realistic, or it's just so
It is kind
crisp?
of almost like a photographic realism. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
Frampton was very famous for this very smooth way of
Hmm.
where you don't see any brush strokes. And I mean, he was a very kind of well-regarded portraitist uh, in the sort of the interwar years.
Yeah.
Um, I always find him interesting because he kind of fell into obscurity for quite a long time.
Hmm.
And it wasn't until he had a retrospective at the Tate Britain in the 80s sometime, and I think that then brought him back into the kind of forefront of public consciousness. Really, I always find it interesting that lots of artists who are really lauded in their lifetime then fall into obscurity, and
Yeah.
it's kind of like the opposite to how we think of like the traditional Van Gogh story of like somebody who's a struggling artist for their entire life who never gets anywhere. I mean, Frampton was very very well known, and he actually came from a very well known family. His dad was a sculptor, uh,
Right.
his mum was a painter. Actually, they were an aristocratic family as well. It was Lord and Lady Frampton, his parents. Sometimes I see that in his paintings. You know, there's like you're talking about kind of aesthetics, a sense of this high, regal.
Yes, yeah. I mean, you can see it even in this one as well. Kind of. I don't know if you made her kind of carry the, but there's the posture
She was a
of
very well
that.
known model. Do you know much about her? The
No,
woman?
I don't. I don't know much about her, but I'd love to.
Well, I mean, it's maybe not particularly fascinating, but as you pick this one, and I agree with you, there is a sense of almost like a wistfulness, maybe sadness. I don't know if it's
Yeah.
sadness, but actually, she was just a really, really good, famous model. She was used a lot by lots of different painters of the time. She was famed for her grace and elegance, and also that she could sit still, completely still, like a stone statue for a very, very prolonged period. So she was used a lot in these kinds of paintings because obviously, I mean, Frampton would spend a year on a painting. He was, you know, a notorious perfectionist, and it was both a blessing and a curse.
Yeah.
Mm.
You could see. I feel like you can see from the just the painting that he's a perfectionist.
Mm.
It's like just all the creases on her dress and all of that, and the fact, and I like as well how it's quite. It's not is it color blocking, but it's so very much like the wall is just the one color and the dress is just the one color, and then there's like a little more variation with the flowers. But I sort of quite like that. I mean, maybe in general it appeals to me as well. I like minimalist, really like clean design, and perfectionism as well. It's because now it's just making me think of like Wes Anderson films and why I like those ones as well. It's the almost like an anal element of
Yeah.
creating
Do you get a sense of claustrophobia at all in this?
in this painting.
Mm.
I don't know. Maybe a little bit. It is framed, and then it's almost like I don't know if it's hinted that she's looking out of a window
Yeah, the light
um
would say it,
towards
doesn't it?
something. Yeah.
I wonder also about its kind of oblique sexual nature. It's got the red shoes, um,
Yeah,
the,
there's
the nipple.
mhm.
It's very
Yeah,
pared back, but there's something just about to kind of blow really in it. It's kind of like almost there with this point of quite a few people I've spoken to about this painting before actually
yeah.
see a real kind of latent sexual desire, frustration, or something else maybe going on in it.
Exactly. I mean, it's probably from. I mean, there's the layer of the male gaze, essentially. Essentially, is it his sexuality? Is his sexuality being projected onto a painting of her? Um, or is her sexuality or her personality actually coming across at all?
Mm.
Um,
I'm still going to push though about why this has a relationship for you, maybe with who you are as a musician.
I think it's the loneliness in a way.
Yeah.
It's it's the this a very composed, it's a very composed woman. She's sitting there and it's holding everything kind of together, and I feel that quite a lot. It's very relatable, because it's like being a singer or being on stage can be very lonely, because you're especially like you're leading a band, because at the same time you're leading a band, and unfortunately it's still the case where most of the time they're like men. You're just surrounded by male musicians, and then you have to lead the band, and then you're also sort of leading the audience, and it's a very lonely job. Like you could you because you get obviously all the back and forth from the audience, from the members of the band, but the task is sort of on, like, really on you. You have, and that's really lonely sometimes, I think. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a sad thing or a negative thing, but it's just sort of a fact, maybe. I find it to be. So I think that's part of why I get drawn to these kind of paintings. I mean, the next one, if we're gonna go to that one next, is also very essentially similar. And I've so because I got the postcards of both these paintings, because they were the ones that kind of stuck with me that day when I was at the Tate, and I stuck them together, because they were, yeah, kind of two sides of the same coin, maybe. um, and it's again that, like, alone. Maybe that's actually true now that you pointed out the claustrophobic kind of feeling, which goes together with loneliness. The feeling, you are confined. You have to hold yourself together in
Yeah,
this
I
small
would say
space
though
that's you.
that Marguerite Kelsey is she is being put on a pedestal. She is like
Mm,
the grace, the beauty. Um, but as
yeah,
much as there's a commonality between the two paintings, it was interesting when again thinking about what Nicole did in terms of sending me work for us to talk about today.
yeah,
Immediately, relationships, visual relationships between paintings. Yes, they're both of women, but there is something more to it than that. However, I'm not sure that um, Kitty is on a pedestal. This is Kitty Garman, Freud's first wife.
yeah. No, no, she's not on a pedestal. Um, I think that's what's interesting
Mm.
is, the to compare and contrast the two of them. The other one is like you say, on a pedestal, very kind of clean and put together. They're almost even sitting in a similar shape, but she's just like quite, disheveled, for example, maybe a little bit more. But she's also, it feels to me anyway, that she's been put there. She's been told to, like, sit there, hold your other breast this way, but open your robe so I see the other one. Um, while with the other one, it was this underlying. He's mentioned the sexual layer, like kind of about to
Mm.
come out, and with this one, it's sort of out there, and yet it's not a sexual painting, you know
I
with
find it's a really
this one.
menacing painting.
It feels, because her facial expression to me, yeah, it doesn't tell me that she's sort of happy to be doing this, to be sitting there.
Again, there's lots of information you can read about this painting. It's very, I think one of the top postcards actually to buy at Tate. Um, People obviously have a connection with it. A lot of people. I'd be really interested to know actually if it's mainly women buying that postcard.
Yeah, that would be really, really good kind of stats, you know. I mean, I can imagine that it is um, women, you know.
Why is it speaking to women then? What do you think? That
I,
like
I
beyond you and I talking about it today, what do you think
yeah,
really might this painting be?
it's this vulnerable woman being exposed, maybe, I think,
Yeah.
you know. It is because you can, you know, I can feel, I know, I can sort of know exactly how that would feel if I was sitting there and then someone would be like, okay,
Mm.
just kind of sit there with your breast exposed for, you know, a long, long time.
I was
And
reading
it's,
earlier. There was something from it's from the archives of the Guardian, I think, and it was talking about the again Tate retrospective of Freud's work back in
yeah,
2002. And the journalist had overheard somebody saying there was like 70 paintings in the retrospective, including this one, and many others of women, uh, partially clothed, completely nude, reclining, sitting. And the person was over saying, I've never seen so many miserable women in bed, about all
wow.
the collected paintings by Freud. But, Freud's womanizing, I suppose, is relatively well documented. I
Mm,
think you know, I don't mean to be in any way slanderous, but again, there's lots of supposition and writing about the relationships he had. Um,
yeah,
did he mistreat people? I can't comment on that at all. But in this painting, as I said, I have a real sense of menace.
yeah.
Because of the dog, the proximity of the dog, which looks like quite a nasty dog to me, much as it's kind of,
Is it protecting her at the same time, though? The dog.
is it protecting her or kind of
Or
holding
is
her hostage? And that naked breast
yeah. Hmm.
and the dog, and thinking about, I don't know. I'm
How
not,
close? Yeah, how close the dog is. I mean, she looks scared. You know, the facial expression is, and that's a like it's so maybe that's why it's disturbing because he's painting that. You know, if you know, he, he must have liked it, you know, to choose to do that.
she was also in the, I think she was pregnant at the time, early pregnancy.
Oh.
Um,
Oh.
like all this stuff that comes out, isn't it? So I think sometimes it's really good on some of the other stuff I do, especially with my friend Bill. We talk a lot about when you know something, it does
Hmm.
impact obviously how you see it. It is good to try and look at this stuff with fresh eyes, but nonetheless, it's unavoidable for me. Like all the time, this painting has these layers of all the things we are saying because I know she was pregnant, because I know it was maybe a very unhappy time,
Yeah.
uh, and I do wonder why would Freud paint his young wife like this? They were given dogs as a wedding present, I think.
Oh.
Um,
It's a
lots
yeah.
of subtext to it.
There's a very, you know, power dynamics, I'm sure.
Can I go back to something you mentioned about being on stage? Because I find it fascinating.
Yeah.
You said, "Oh, do you know what I mean?" And I was like, "Mhm, yeah, I know exactly." No, I do not know what you mean when you talk about being on stage. This idea of being on stage yet being alone and lonely, and though you're not saying that that's necessarily negative, this element of being on the pedestal with all the male musicians around you, with this woman
Hmm.
that wants something from you. Do you ever feel got at?
Uh, yes, yes. I mean, you know, sometimes there are like, you know, actual feeling because people would come up maybe and then because this is just, you know, the one thing that came out to mind. One time I got off stage and this older man, you know, middle-aged man or whatever, um, showed me his phone and said, "Oh, I took photos of you, you know. Like, look at this. Do you want me to send them over?" And I saw it, and it was just like, I mean, it was fine. He took photos, but I think I don't know if it was the angle. It was very much yeah, like he was gawking. It was very much oh, I've been it's not me because I saw it and immediately was like no, no, thank you. Like I can't maybe I could have just said like no, could you just delete those please? But I'm like no, I don't need those photos. Thank you very much because it didn't look like me. It was very much I don't know. So yeah, that's being gawked at for sure. Um, I think about because okay, so because I'm usually quite jumpy around stage. I mean, I'm very active, and it's very physical, and it gets really hot and sweaty and all these things. Like, ideally, I would want to just jump around in like my sports bra on stage, you know, because I see like men do it, and men can do that. Men can like take off their shirts. It is perfectly fine. But I'm always so self-conscious on stage in a different way, and in a different way I know that men aren't. No, I'm not saying that men aren't self-conscious because they definitely are, and musicians are definitely very, very self-conscious, but not in the same way. And it makes me very self-aware when I'm dancing as well, because yeah, that gawking aspect, because there are people who are just they're just enjoying it, but that there are people who are looking in a way that you might not want them to look at you in that way, but I
And
can't control that. So
when you look at these paintings of these women, are you is that the parity then, that we're gawking at them and that you feel they don't want us to?
yeah, maybe that, or I don't know, I think it was more like they didn't want the painters perhaps to
Mm.
be doing that. Um, yeah, maybe there is an element of uh, not wanting to, but but anyway, still being participatory in the male gaze. Um, you know,
Mm.
in this kind of private moment, perhaps, or um, yeah,
I'm really
there's a
interested
little bit of that.
in this idea though of you being on stage. And of course, you're on stage. That is your job. That is what you do so brilliantly. Um, and then you sending me these paintings and thinking about, is there like a bit of a reluctant heroine in you're the reluctant heroine, or are you really enjoying being on stage?
That's that's really that's a good way of putting it, I think. A reluctant heroine. Although it sounds also like you don't want to call yourself a heroine somehow. But yeah, there's a balance. Yeah, almost like a catch-22 of
Mm.
wanting to be on stage, and of course wanting that attention, and at the same time not wanting that attention at all. Um, you know, and it is really, and sometimes I can feel that my private life, that is being invaded. So when I'm in a particular, maybe not as good of a mood or something, I'd have days where I just feel like people are being intrusive. They are just intruding, and I can't get away. I can't really close off because my job isn't to be closed off. The whole reason why I know I've done a good job after a performance is that people feel really familiar. People would come up, people would give you hugs and all these things. And on the one hand, I'm like, this is great. I'm glad that I managed to create a connection, and you felt that and you enjoyed it. But at the same time, now I'm off stage as well afterwards, and I'm just back to being me. And I don't like being, having my personal space
Mm.
invaded in that way. So there is a constant managing of that, of,
Is
the.
that a worry for the future? Because I mean, again, thinking about how I have got to know you, it was because I heard your voice on the radio.
Yeah.
And apart from the voice, I didn't know anything about you. And actually, it took several attempts trying to listen to Craig Charles and actually what he was saying, and going through Shazam and all sorts of things to try and find you.
Hmm.
Um, you are described, though, even on his show, as a one to watch, a rising star. I mean, do you worry about this for the future, that your privacy is going to be blown apart?
Uh, yes. Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely a worry, but I understand and I accept that it's part of it. And I suppose because this is the path that I'm going on now, you know, before this, I suppose I was trying to manage it in a way where um, pretty much like in Scotland, and people know me in the sort of jazz, the blues jazz scenes. I'm a no name. Sometimes people would kind of recognize me on the street and stuff, but it's all like quite local,
Mm.
and I haven't really had to promote actively or had to do with too much of that part because I was gigging. I was a gigging musician. I was just out there gigging 3 or 4 times a week, and it was almost like I didn't need to add on that. I don't have to be active on social media. I don't have to do this extra selling of myself in that way, so I could keep it quite but private. But at the same time, that's why it's a disadvantage, like you said, when people hear and then they don't find anything. There's like not a lot about me out there, where in this business you kind of have to. So this is what I'm learning a bit more to be okay with, and just
Maybe this, maybe not this.
yeah, exactly. Maybe not that. Even though like I'm very comfortable with, nudity and all that, but I think it's more, you want to be able to choose when
Yeah.
um right? When you do it. Uh but yeah, I'm learning a lot more about how you can be in charge of um your own story. If you're going to have to get into this game of doing all the other stuff on top of what you actually want to do, which is creating and writing and singing and performing and connecting to an audience, you then have to give a little bit more of your private life. But there's a way to manage it, I think.
Mm.
Because you can, like, there are certain things that definitely I'll just keep private, but yeah, it's a balancing. I'm still learning, but I'll accept it. I'm not going to be, it's like, oh, I want to be successful, but I don't want to do these things. I don't want people to know me. Um, it's all, you have to sacrifice a little bit if you want to gain a little bit, and that's perfectly fine and acceptable to me.
So now for something completely different, maybe.
Yeah. This one, again, that like really, really kind of clear, clean cut. I think I just like that aesthetic. This one stuck with me because of this idea of diving into something fully. When I saw this, to me, it was about, I immediately connected it to this sense of commitment, of diving headfirst into something, having blind faith in the thing that you want, and you just go for it. And that very much speaks to my personality, I think, because sure, sometimes I would have dived into things and maybe regretted it, but um, I've never, but not as much as regretting not doing something. So yeah, yeah, a bigger splash. To me, it was about like diving in. It's just, if you want to kind of try something out, if you want to do something, you go and do it. You commit wholeheartedly, and maybe it'll fail and not work out. But I would always ask myself that question: will I regret not doing this, or will I regret more if I went and did it, kind of what, either like, do you want this or will you regret not doing it?
Hmm.
That's the
Has
question you
that
have
been
to.
your philosophy for pretty much your whole life?
Uh, yeah, I think so. I think that sort of, um, yeah, kind of is a running theme. Um, I mean, the first time I was super shy as a kid, um, just like uber shy. Maybe like to the point where I thought maybe I had stage fright, but I didn't. I was just really really shy, and and I was when I started to grow up and wanting to sing more, and I started singing with friends sort of in school, but really just for a small group of friends, and even that I'd get super nervous about singing in front of two of my closest friends or something.
Mm.
And when I was 19, there was this thing for the Indonesian embassy in Stockholm was having a celebration or some kind of event, and they were like, oh, we're gonna have a stage and there's going to be music, and like whoever who wants to perform can go. So I thought, okay, this is like, I have to do this now because clearly there was something inside of me that was waiting to do it, but was just too scared. So I kind of signed up, and that was the only commitment that I needed. Even though like I could have backed up at any moment, but I committed to myself that I said yes to it, which meant then great, I've already said yes to this.
Mm.
So no matter what you're feeling, you just have to follow through. Um,
I love that this
so
painting has brought this out. This sense. It's just like it's the commitment. You've done it now. You're off the diving board. There's no going
exactly,
back.
yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, you've made the commitment, and the commit could just be like you say yes to something, so you're in it now. You're in the water, so you might as well swim. What else are you going to do? You just do it, and it's always turned out to be something either good or a learning experience. Either way.
Do you
So
think
yeah, and
when we look at these paintings, uh, they're not from the same time frame?
no,
They are
no,
all from the 20th century, and thinking about your sound and I guess like the I don't know if it's right to call it the aesthetics of your sound.
yeah,
Um,
you
like
could you could describe it that way. You could
you know,
describe aesthetic of sounds, yeah.
is it in? I don't mean it lives in the past, but obviously it's very respectful of the past. Your sound.
Yeah, I think, well, because I suppose because hmm, I don't know if it's a lot of nostalgia, maybe. Because,
Mm.
you grow up listening to music that your parents, like, my music that my parents liked to listen to when they were young. So that, like, goes back several decades. And then, I am attached to music that I grew up with that now is already as well, like, decades old. Um, and yeah, I think you have all these things, inputs that come in, stimuli, external stimuli that come in, and it takes a decade or two to really really kind of process, and it comes out, and then um, I guess that's how it feels to me, because now I feel like I'm writing things that are, yeah, that happened a long time ago. I'm going back. I'm actively kind of going back in history. I'm looking into. I'm writing more about family, about previous generations,
Mm.
about my mother, about my grandmother. There's a lot of that because it's just so rich,
Yeah.
um,
But also
emotional
there's a sense of
and cultural.
cross pollination with that, isn't there? That you've arrived at this point because of everything they've done
Exactly.
that all these people have lived, but that along the way their experience has been a cross pollination as well, and that here we are in this moment. And funnily enough, again, there's a sense that there are mixed messages and metaphors in each of the paintings you've selected
Yeah.
as well, and a kind of multi-layer of like available to meaning, uh, which is why I love that you said this one particularly is about a kind of commitment.
Hmm.
Many other people would maybe not even think of that. They would think instead about, transient nature of water, about blue sky day, about, something else, not
Yeah.
necessarily separate to what you've said, but just
Yeah.
interesting.
That is interesting because I think the first thing that I saw when I saw this painting was that, oh, there was a person in the diving board, and now that they're fully submerged.
Mm.
That's like the main thing.
So, unlike anyone else really that I've spoken to, you you did really want to talk about cinema as the
Yeah.
informer for a lot of who you are, the sounds you make.
Yeah. I am. I'm a huge cinema fan. I studied film studies in uni. I thought that was what I wanted to do. Was work in film somehow. I got involved in like film festivals and all these things, just because I loved, I was consuming so much films, and I thought I'd do that. So, and films have inspired a lot of songwriting.
Mm,
Sometimes because there's so much. I mean, there's already music in it, but it's a mood. It could be a mood of a film, or just an image that I saw, or the story. So yeah, it informs a lot. It could be sometimes you can watch film. I can watch a film and be left with an emotional impression that has probably nothing to do with the film's theme necessarily, but an impression strong enough that makes me want to write or explore that and turn it into something else. It just plants ideas. So yeah, I guess that's why I wanted to kind of bring up
but why
cinema.
this one, The Last Black Man in San Francisco? You know that we were speaking before we started recording.
Yeah.
Haven't seen this. I've heard of it. I've heard especially about the opening shots where we ride on a skateboard,
Hmm.
and it's apparently great, but I haven't seen it myself. Could you tell us a little bit why you did pick this movie?
Well, I picked it because it's just one of those films that's beautiful in look, in sound, in execution of acting and editing. It's I don't want to say like perfect film because that's like a really big statement, but it just has a really nice flavor, if I want to say that, like tone. It's very soft, and it's melancholy but not depressing.
Mm,
It it's it's shot. Some of the shots look very much like old Hollywood.
yeah.
Old style sort of Hollywood, like when someone is sort of lit slightly from downward angle and from the side. Um, Everything is a bit glowy. It's nice, and the score really stayed with me as well. I think it's someone called Emile Moseri, who did the score, and it's really beautiful. So it's a combination of this nice flow
Mm,
with the beats. There's quite like good, you know, beats that the film was touching, pacing maybe.
yeah.
Um,
You said already that, being on stage is lonely, though not necessarily negative. You say
mhm.
now melancholy, but not depressing. And,
Yeah,
it's like everything about what you're saying. And actually, even when I listen to you and your sound, I saw you on an excerpt from STV probably about 8 years ago. You were singing
yeah.
birds. Is it birds?
Birds. Yeah, it's the song of birds.
Did you write that song?
Yes, yeah. I wrote that song I wrote that song in Edinburgh, in Brunsfield Links. So there's meadows, um, big park, and then I think one day I was just walking up the park and I saw birds. I'm just fascinated with birds in general. I can stand in the street and watch the pigeons do their kind of their formation thing where they just like as a massive group fly from roof to roof. And I don't know, I find it really really like beautiful and fascinating. So I was just watching birds doing that, and started, I immediately had the first few lines of that song
But
in
isn't that
my head.
fascinating that you've got all these kind of approaching quite like what would otherwise be quite stark elements or statements about your nature,
Hmm.
either just as a human or as a songwriter, singer, but actually everything you've dialed it back so it's the subtle version of itself, and that is it. Is that maybe something that is fitting for your actual sound? So lonely but not negative, melancholy but not depressing. Is there some other thing? Because I know you do love words. You've told me like if we could approach the stark biggie, but then pull it back a bit into the Nicole Smit subtle version. What other
Hmm.
things would you say about your sound?
About my sound, yeah, I think that's a good way of it. I want it to be subtle, subtle but not so vague that you don't get a clear idea of the story or the emotion of the song. I always have this teacher. I took like creative writing at some point, just for like a module, and one of the first things he taught me was imagery, like always kind of that thing, like pair it back into to imagery. So this thing of big ideas, big ideas like falling in love, right? And falling in love is massive, and but how do you take the essence of falling in love into something more concrete? How do you put that feeling into small things, like perhaps walking along and you see birds
Mm.
flying? How do you translate that? And so I do quite like doing that, I think. It's a
So
good
how
way,
do,
like,
I mean, I've skipped forward a few, we can go back, but
yes.
looking at Romeo and Juliet, another film that you wanted to speak about, which to me is the Baz Luhrmann version is absolutely the thing that is about stark, bombastic, um, kind of in your face, loud, gigantic. What, I mean, do you take from even the loudest things something of quiet?
Yeah, yeah. I suppose I do. I mean, with Romeo and Juliet, that was, I think, because when did that come out? Yeah, 96. So I was young still, and it made a huge impression on me. Without really, I didn't really understand. I didn't understand like the subtlety of it, because obviously there is, you just see like all these colors and massive, um, the love story, and in 196 I was like 11, so I was just at that precipice of almost about to understand what those feelings were. um and and still I think the my favorite thing from Romeo and Juliet is more the feeling, the yeah, those, well, I mean, not the aquarium scene is very 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 famous, and all that, um but like small looks. I'm now, yeah, I'm kind of now realizing that I do pay attention to a lot. Oh, that's what sticks with me when I watch films or anything like that. Are my favorite moments are usually the things that aren't anything. A split second of someone. Oh, I really love it when she looked at him or made a little bit of like a small mouth movement, and those kinds of things.
Because you also have these two, which I have to say are like the zenith of small movement.
Yes, yeah, they're so. I love that the whole trilogy, you know, because um, it is just normal people. I don't know. It's just like all these small stuff and the kind of thing where because I know some friends who who think that these movies are boring because they're like nothing happens in it, but lots of things happen in it. All the little gestures they do, that bit like that photo there, like the bit in the tram where he's just about to kind of touch her and he like pulls away his hand, and everything is just yeah, though all those little bits really kind of hit me.
So again, I mean, musically, when you're singing about love, you're not talking about the full thrust, so to speak. You're talking about the hand pulling away, the
Yeah,
object touch.
yeah, yeah, it's not, because I find it's more personal. It's more real when it is those small moments. Big statements. I think I feel lost. I feel lost in them, in massive statements that doesn't have a core that ties you in. So blues is a great example. Like Ball and Chain, which is just a 12-bar slow blues with Big Mama Thornton, and I used to sing that a lot. It was like one of my favorite songs to sing, and they're quite massive, like statements in blues love songs. It's just my baby went away, doesn't love me anymore, like this. But with Ball and Chain, there's, for example, the first line is, I'm sitting by my window, like watching the rain coming down or something. And I think how I like to perform, and I don't know, I don't do this consciously, but I put myself so that I feel it. I'm sitting by my window. It's those kind of idea. I'm like, I'm sitting by my window and I feel the rain coming down. And that's where then that feeling of heartbreak is coming from, rather than saying, I'm so heartbroken right now about you. I'm still saying I'm heartbroken, but I'm saying it through, I'm sitting by my window and I'm watching rain coming down.
Do you think a lot of really very sensitive and highly creative people quite deliberately have to dial things back because otherwise the world just explodes?
Yeah, I think there's truth in that. It's too painful,
Hmm.
perhaps. Some things are just is too big, too painful. So you just kind of, yeah, you pare it down. Again, that's part of like keeping things together, and having a bit more control, perhaps, of like of the massive emotions and pain, and all these things.
I'm just going to go to this next because this, I think, is a
Yeah.
masterclass as a movie in how something that is so profoundly shocking can also be so incredibly subtle.
Yes, it's it's so beautiful for something so disturbing and
Disturbing.
so dark. And yeah, I wrote a song kind of from watching this film. um it's called Whisper. Yeah. And but this yeah, the song is about, because I think I watched it, and I just wrote the song about cult leaders, or from the perspective of these young women who are charmed by a charismatic, leader that is selling them, promising them, beautiful things, but taking them somewhere else. And then that's like the first verse, and then in the second verse, it's the perspective of the parents of the family of these women, of these young women that get, yeah, get sort of, I guess, disappear from their lives. So yeah, that is probably yeah, the one film that just like really gave me quite a lot to write about.
Hmm.
Um,
I was thinking about that. I mean, this is it's a very unusual film. Obviously, we're going to recommend that you go and see all these films if you're watching them
yes,
about them now. From my point of view, this one is like the sleeper. This is the one that will stand the test of time almost because there's nothing too noisy about it, and yet, my God, it is hard hitting some of the things that happen in it.
yeah,
Is that just life? Like, we get on with it. We have to ride these very challenging times. We have to make do, and we often compensate for failures in others or in our disappointments with actually just accepting stuff that if we heard somebody else was going to accept the same things, we would say no, don't. We give ourselves up to be not comfortable, but definitely give ourselves up a little bit often to be loved.
yeah.
Mm.
I mean, yeah, that's how, like you said, when like people just kind of move on, we cope. I think human beings are incredibly good at coping. You know, how quickly you make something normal,
Yeah,
right? You just be like, okay, but this is what we have to deal with now, and there's you're not gonna be running around in hysterics all the time. That's just not gonna work. Um, yeah, it's a lot. Uh, yeah, you said it's hard hitting. This film, it packs a punch
mm,
without it being aggressive in any way. And yeah, I just kind of think of John Hawkes being so probably one of the best portrayal of kind of that cult leader thing where because he is actually charming and scary all at the same time.
yeah,
Yeah.
charismatic and repulsive and beautiful and evil all at once.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
This one, why did you send us this? Is this a sensory overload film?
Is it? I don't find it sensory overload. Um, it's again, I mean, it feels so like that is just the stuff that I like where it's a bit of darkness, but it's so there's a great love story in this one as well. Um, and I think with this one that the kind of loving two people at once. There's like different types of love that they deal with in the film, and having multiple feelings at once.
Yeah,
I think that's something that I've been thinking about a lot in the last couple of years, a bit more about how we are capable of feeling so many different things that don't contradict or cancel each other out.
yeah.
You know,
Is it not the absolute antithesis of like a Disney love story? You know,
I never thought about it that way.
we're told and we're taught, aren't we, that you even now, I think we're taught you will meet one person and you will love them forever, and
Yeah,
there's so many things tied up about failure and you know to not make a relationship last or work is hugely damning.
yeah,
But actually, more than that, to ever claim that, for example, there's love enough for more than one is so many
oh
people just can't go there, right?
no, and you don't really learn. I feel like it took me to be 30 something years old to understand that it's not like that. It's not like the Disney films. It's not like the rom-coms where you can only love one person at a time, and that there's aren't any different types of love, and
Mm.
you might one person really can't provide everything for you. you know, um, that
Yeah,
it's complex.
the reason why I said about sensory overload is I think because you're kind of cocked from the beginning, knowing that this is going to be sad. And so that susceptibility to that sadness is always at the root of all the other senses or feelings. Maybe that's just me. It was very kind of, I don't mean it overshadowed, but there was a flavor. It's like a synthesis of emotion, always
Hmm.
between love and sadness and desire and regret. And I wonder if maybe again everything we're looking at is about this extraordinary synthesis of ideas, of emotions. And again, thinking about you and your voice, the timbre of your voice, the way you sound is like the synthesis of all those emotions in one place, moving through time. It's extraordinary.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, because they all exist in the same place, don't they? All of that happiness, sadness, heartbreak, being in love and being heartbroken at the same time. It's just they're all in the same place there. Once you're open to one of them, you're open and exposed to all of them at once. And I yeah, this is making me really miss sort of being able to perform live, because you get to feel. I think that's one of the most gratifying, rewarding, experience. Being able to do that, being able to convey
Mm.
all of those emotions, like you said, at the same time to other people through like one song sometimes in just one line, and you can start in a really sad place and end the sentence in a note with a smile, which is an amazing journey to be able to, like, I like doing that, and it's amazing that I get to share that with people at all.
Yeah. So your singing, your way of performing is about taking us all with you on this emotional journey. Even if it lasts 3 minutes, it's not the point. It's about being completely attentive and with you.
Mm.
Does it make a difference to you? For example, I've not seen you play live, although I am very homesick myself, and I would like to come home sometime soon. So,
Soon.
but I heard your voice on the radio, as I've said. Does it make a difference to you that people consume your music in that format compared to seeing you live?
um no, no, not really. It doesn't make a difference to me how they take it in. I think I'm quite lucky that there isn't a huge disparity between how my voice sounds on a recording and live. It's it's pretty much the same, I think. The only maybe occasionally I would think that, oh, it would be nice if if people could come see us, me or like the band do this song live, because there's an extra element of energy that you might not be able to infuse in a recording in the same way. And some songs are more alive in a live setting as well. But
Isn't
in
that
terms of,
something you could
yeah,
also say about this idea of infusing an energy into like a live setting of something? I'm just going to go back before we finish. I'm going to go back to one of the paintings, the first painting.
yeah.
You know, an infusion of life and energy about being alive. Do you think ever that any kind of artist, whether it's a visual artist or a musician or a writer or a dancer, mm, is there any way of really potting life in something that's not immediately happening and being experienced.
Hmm. Yeah, I think so. Is
We
that not what?
we hope so, don't we, as artists? We do this too.
Yeah, exactly.
Glad you said that, and you don't go, well, no, because
isn't that what art is, right? You put you that's what you do. You infuse because I'm also a very I don't know what you call it, but I believe in even inanimate objects, um, taking in an energy of a person, you know. Um, I mean, that's why we like going to historical buildings and all these things. It's like, oh, it's been it's taken in, things absorb
when you think
light.
about where you've performed, some of the spaces in which you've performed, and they're all at the moment, I don't want to finish on a sad note, but we think about that energy being imbued and infused into those spaces.
Yeah.
Whilst they're all quiet, they're maybe just resting, waiting,
Yeah.
and waiting for you to come back. And again, it just brings me to this painting. It's like, this is you, resting and waiting.
Resting and waiting. Yeah. I'm like ready. Sitting and being ready to just kind of burst out. I can imagine myself crying the first time I'm back on stage or something,
Hold on
out
just
of
a second.
sheer
You've already
overwhelm.
said to me that you're lost in big statements. That's a pretty big statement you just made. This highly emotional
Yeah.
response. Nicole Smit, it's such a pleasure talking to you.
Oh, the same. So
Thank you
yeah, it's
for
great.
agreeing to meet with me, and also thank you for your fascinating choices to help us get a handle more on who you are and what you think. Um,
Well, thank you. It's been enlightening for me as well, learning about myself a little bit more.
well, thank you. And once again, just before we go, you've got your single Strong Women is coming out on what date?
2nd of April.
And where can we find it?
Well, you can find it through Ramrock Records, like Bandcamp, yeah. And the music video, 8th of March, and then more information about, where to pre-save and all that stuff.
Okay, well, we will be listening and looking out for you, Nicole Smit. Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thanks, Andy.